What was that voice? Hey guys, folks, I just wanted to talk about what are control variables today. I think this is super important and it's really tricky to think about what are control variables. So, if you don't know me, I am Professor Dave Maslach. I'm an Associate Professor of Innovation, and I've got really strange voices sometimes. So, I actually wanted to talk about what are these control variables. So, in the last couple of videos, I was talking about what are variables that we actually use in science a lot, and one of them is actually control variables. And control variables are things that you just want to control in this world to rule out alternative explanations. It sounds kind of scary, but it's really not in terms of what we actually do. And it is really important for us to rule out these alternative explanations. We need to explain that something is actually happening, and we need to say, hey, it wasn't that thing that happened, right? So a lot of people, you might be hearing about this a lot, and in your parents might talk about sort of maybe something about science, or you might be hearing about medicine or something in this world, and then you hear about like, how do we know that this thing actually exists? How do we know that it's not something else that happens? Well, scientists actually try to spend a great deal of time trying to rule out all of these things that people have questions about. Well, maybe it was this, or maybe it was that. Well, we try to do that, and that's what good science actually tries to do, is rule out all of those possible things, and we try to come up with different control variables to rule out those alternative explanations. So something that might explain what else is going on, right? So really common things. I want to go back to this example. You watched the last couple of videos, I've been talking about farting. It's a real thing that we all have to deal with. And how do we know what actually causes farting in our life and what doesn't? Well, it's actually a really tricky thing, right? So we might think it's diet, for example, but then there's all these other things that we might think about that might affect that, right? So some of us are naturally not farters and other people are. Like I might fart more than you, and your parents might fart less than you, right? Like there's all sorts of things like that happen, and we need to rule those things out and explain those things or control for those things to make sure that doesn't cause any problems in the experiments or the things that we're trying to study. So, maybe females might fart less than males. I don't know. Maybe they fart more. I don't know. Like girls might fart more than boys, but like we have to rule those things out, and that's what those control variables are trying to control, and they're trying to rule out. Maybe that people that own dogs or cats fart more than actually maybe they fart less because it's always the dog that is farting, right? If you didn't know this, everybody loves to blame the dog on farting. So, maybe it's the dog that farts a lot and humans don't fart that much, right? So we have to control for those things, and we have to rule those particular things out. Maybe, for example, that there is, it's a sunny day, or you've gotten an extra exercise in that day and you were able to naturally get all of those farts out of your belly by getting all those exercises and you're walking. And so then when you go do the experiment that day, or you start to measure how much you fart, you're not going to fart that much, right? Because you've already sort of gotten all that stuff out of you. So we need to control for that. We need to make sure that we are not, we're not having what are called, it's another big word, but hopefully you don't get too scared from this, a confound, something that can explain what else is going on. And that's what we try to do. Often, some of the biggest controls, if you want to know, especially with human beings, some of the biggest controls that we're going to try to control for in science is things like your gender, for example. So whether you're male or female, boy or girl, or your age. Age is really, really important for a lot of these things. Older people are going to, naturally fart more than younger people. They might, I don't know, but I'm assuming that is probably the case, right? Because their body is at a different stage. So there's all these things that might sort of interfere or confound with the experiment. We have to rule those particular things out. So you want to look at those control variables and think about all the different things that might be problematic before you go into an experiment or before you do research. Those are really, really important before you jump into it. So I want you to, a really fun exercise is to think about, what do I want to explain today? And then think about all the other alternative explanations that could explain that and come up with control variables to explain those particular things, right? So, for gender, it's easy. You might have boy or girl, or, boy, girl, or other, or something like that, right? So that's really important to think about those things. So, with that, that's all I want to talk about. Good luck, have fun, and hopefully this explains some of the scary nonsense that we might talk about in science. It's really not that scary, and it's just, we're trying to rule out all those things where people have questions. All right, take care. Bye.